fast ends tomorrow, obviously. It's always, I think, a challenge for the person who's giving the last talk, because everybody talks about everything. So by the end of the week, you just have to be creative. So I'm going to try to be creative. If there are any of my Sunday school students in here, you're going to hear a little bit of the lesson that we gave on Sunday. But yeah, we want to talk about St. Mary. I want to discuss a little bit from some of the stuff from the Old Testament that is a symbol of St. Mary, and then also we want to talk about her role as the intercessor of our souls. And finally, we'll just look at an example of one of the saints who heavily relied on the intercessory power of St. Mary, and how St. Mary was a crucial point in that person's life, and that would be St. Mary of Egypt. So we'll get to her at the end. But always, I like to start with talking about what we can learn from the Old Testament about St. Mary. And we'll do this in two ways, mainly to talk about characters and to talk about symbols or types. So the two characters that I want to talk about St. Mary from the Old Testament are Eve, obviously Eve, and the mother of the prophet Samuel, okay? So first, just to note that there is not a lot about St. Mary in the New Testament, okay? She's like a super main character, probably the number 2 character after Christ, but you find there are very limited amount of references to her in the scriptures. For example, St. Paul, how many books does he have in the New Testament? 14, right? The super majority. And he doesn't talk about her at all, okay? And neither do the Catholic epistles and the Gospels. Even some of them are limited in how they talk about her. So, Yani, the most that we know about St. Mary comes from one Gospel, the Gospel of St. Luke. Okay, so oftentimes we talk about the humility of St. Mary, and I think the humility of St. Mary is exemplified even in the fact that she is hidden in the scriptures, and that we don't see or talk about her a lot in the scriptures. But the best place for us to learn about St. Mary, right, because we can, of course, open up the Bible and read what we have about St. Mary, but it's not a lot. So the best way for us to understand what does the church say about St. Mary, what is the teaching of the church about St. Mary, is to read the Theotokeios. So the Theotokeias are in the midnight praises in the Tezbahah, and we have one for every day, right? So it goes Thursday Theotokeia, Friday Theotokeia, Saturday Theotokeia, and so on. And those are the best way for us to understand what is the teaching of the church about St. Mary. What does the church think about St. Mary? For example, the Orthodox position about St. Mary, which we'll talk about a little bit more, is a middle position, okay? Because the Catholic Church holds her in a very different and high esteem than we hold her. They say that she was immaculately conceived, right? So no original sin. And the Protestant denominations hold that St. Mary is just like a jewelry box. So she just held the Creator, and then that's pretty much that's the extent of her importance, just being as a jewelry box. But the Orthodox position is a center position in between those. We don't hold her as a jewelry box, and of course we don't say that she was born without sin because St. Mary needed salvation like the rest of us. That's not to say that she sinned, but that's just to say that she inherited the same nature that we did, which was corrupted, right? So it needed saving, it needed redemption. So, like I said, the Theotokeias are the best place to start, but really quick before we go to the Theotokeias, we should just start off with Genesis. And in Genesis, you see St. Mary is in Genesis from the beginning, but obscurely, right? She's not by name in Genesis, but in Genesis chapter 3, we see that after the fall, after Adam and Eve ate from the tree, we see that God already has a plan for the salvation. Okay, so this is a really nice icon. I don't know, I'm sure you guys can't all see it, but that's St. Mary and Eve, and then St. Mary is stepping on the head of the serpent. Okay, so that is directly from Genesis chapter 3. I'll read it quick. It says, "The woman said," this is Eve talking to God, "The serpent deceived me and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed." Notice that the second seed is capitalized, so that's referring to Christ. he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Okay? So when it says enmity, do we know what enmity means? Like, it's like a type of bad separation. Okay? Enmity is like as if two countries are in a war, and you could say that those countries are at enmity with each other. Okay? So that's what that word here means, enmity. And when it says that he shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel, that when it says the head being bruised is referring to the serpent, okay? So the serpent is being stepped on. You can see that the head of the serpent is being crushed, and that is exactly what happened when? In the crucifixion, right? In the crucifixion, Christ's death defeated death, right? He killed death by his death. Have we heard that before? So that's exactly what this is showing, right? Is that the crushing of the head of the serpent is the death of Christ. And when we say that Christ's heel was bruised, that refers to the suffering, okay? That refers to the agony that the Lord had to endure. So that's the bruising of the heel and the crushing of the head, okay? And then if we look at the Theotokeias, because remember what the Theotokeias will be our reference point for understanding what we need to know about St. Mary. It says, this is from Thursday Theotokeia part 2. It says, God revoked the first curse which was pronounced upon our race through the violation incurred by the first woman when she ate from the fruit of the tree. Okay, focus on this second sentence easier. It says, because of Eve, the door of paradise was closed, and through the Virgin Mary, it was opened to us once more. Okay, so there you go. The church is explaining to you that St. Mary has a role in our salvation. Okay, more than just being a jewelry box. Okay, the second character we want to focus from the Old Testament is the mother of Samuel. Okay, Samuel is a super, super important character in the Old Testament. He was the one who anointed the first what? King. Very good, right? So when God wanted to move away from the time of the judges, so I don't want judges to rule over my people anymore. What's an example of one of the judges from the book of Judges? Does anyone remember? Like Samson. Right? Samson, right? So Samson was an example of the judge. But at that time, there were no kings yet. So after the time of the judges, God permitted, not wanted, but permitted for Israel to have a monarchy with kings. So Samuel was the one who anointed Saul and David. Okay, so he's a huge, important character in the Old Testament. And the way that we can relate the mother of Samuel to the Holy Theotokos is in two ways. So the mother of the prophet Samuel, her name was Hannah. And the mother of St. Mary, her name was Anna, which is a play on Hannah. So they had the same names, which is pretty, that's fabulous. And another thing is that Anna, the mother of Samuel, was barren for a long time. Likewise, Hannah is the mother of Samuel. Anna is the mother. So both mothers were barren for a long time and prayed to the Lord for children until God finally granted their request and gave them children. And beyond that, being barren, that is nice. But also they did something, both of them did the same thing. They dedicated the child to the temple. Who knows what that is? Who knows what that means? Does anyone? Yes? Yes, they left. Yeah, but dedicated is a better, use the word dedicated, it's better. They dedicated the child to the temple, okay? That left is like abandoned. They didn't abandon it. Like, people leave their kids at the fire station. No, we don't want to say that she was abandoned, but we want to say that she was dedicated to the temple. So one of the commandments in the Jewish law was that the first child to open the womb belongs to me. That's what God said. So the first child was supposed to be dedicated to God. Okay, the first child of any relationship. So in this sense, you can see a very clear parallel. Not just that they were barren, but that both mothers, after the child grew to a small age, not even like a big age, dedicated the child to the service of God in the temple. Okay, and the last crucial parallel between Hannah and Saint Mary is that the prayer that they made after they conceived. Okay, so we all know that Saint Mary has a very famous prayer in Luke chapter 2 where she is in Luke 1, where she's giving praise to God after Archangel Gabriel visited her and he announced, okay, you're going to have the Son of Man, the Son of God, and he's going to dwell in you. And then she had a beautiful prayer, right? Do we remember that prayer a little bit? Hannah had the almost same prayer, but centuries earlier in the Old Testament. And this is the key stuff that I just want to highlight from both prayers so that we can see how clear the resemblance is between Hannah and between St. Mary. So it says, and Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. Okay, this was Hannah. And then let's see what St. Mary said many centuries later when a similar, a miraculous conception occurred. She said, and Mary said, my soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit has rejoiced in God my Savior, for he has regarded the lowly state of his handservant. He has put down the mighty from their thrones and exalted the lowly. So in both passages, we can see the women are expressing joy. They're rejoicing, right? And they're also expressing that God has made those who are humble to be glorious, and those who are haughty or who are prideful to be humbled. Okay, both of those are in the same prayer. Okay, so I think it's a very stark comparison, and that shows us that the character of Saint Mary is throughout the Old Testament. Right, this parallel is a foreshadowing of, because what Hannah gave birth to Samuel the prophet, but Saint Mary gave birth to the Word of God. Okay, so it's incomplete in the Old Testament. It's a foreshadowing of the greater thing to come, and that's what we see throughout all of the Old Testament, is that foreshadowing. Okay, moving away from the characters now, let's quickly talk about the symbols. Again, this is straight from the Theotokeias. It's so wonderful that we have something so old as the Theotokeias, and many of the Theotokeias were written during the Apostolic era. Saint Cyril wrote some of the Theotokeias, and that's from the 5th century. Okay, so it's old, and when something is old, it has a higher level of reliability, and you have more confidence that this is what the church believed early, before things might have gotten muddy in the middle centuries, but something from the 5th or 4th century, we can be confident that it's reliable. Okay, so this is how the church interprets the things that we see in the Old Testament and relates them to St. Mary. And if you could just try to remember what, because I couldn't put it on the slide, but Saturday Theotokeia, part 15, if you just look at it, that they likened it to you, O Virgin Mary, right? It says the whole Theotokeia is just explaining this thing from the Old Testament, which we're going to talk about, was likened to St. Mary in X way. The ladder of Jacob was likened to St. Mary in this way. The Ark of the Covenant was in this way. So if you're free and you can remember Saturday, part 15, that is a really prime Theotokeia to read if you want to understand what the Old Testament references to St. Mary. So the big picture here in these references is a container, but we shouldn't just think about it like a container that we can get rid of, but a container holds something. Okay, so all of these things in the Old Testament, more or less, some of them are not really, like the rod of Aaron isn't a container, and the ladder isn't really a container, but in a certain sense it is. But most of these things are containers. Okay, so Noah's Ark. Who can tell me, how does Noah's Ark resemble Saint Mary? Justin? Yes, that's good. So, and not just the animals, but it held the people, and it saved them from what? From what? Yeah, it saved, I thought someone said Goliath. Yeah, it saved them from the waters, okay? It saved them from the flood. They would have drowned otherwise, right? So the ark was a type of salvation, right? And St. Mary held the one who gave us salvation, okay? So that's a clear parallel. The tabernacle. What is the tabernacle? No one from class last week, but who can say what is the tabernacle? Is anyone? Luke? Very good. Very good, very good. So the tabernacle, it's the place of worship for the Jews, like Luke said, but it was during a specific time. Was there a tabernacle when the temple was established? No, there was no need, right? So the tabernacle was used when the Israelites were what? Wandering in the desert. So Egypt, Judea. But in between Egypt and Judea, there is how many years of wandering? 40 years of wandering, right? So they needed to pray somehow, and God had explicitly detailed to them, this is how you will pray to me in the desert when you're wandering, okay? And the tabernacle, another word for it is tent, okay? There were no buildings, obviously, when they were in the desert, so they had to set up tents, okay? And if you look in the Gospel of St. John, in the intro, it says he dwelt among us. In English, we don't have a verb for tented. There is no, you can't say he tented among us. But that's what it is in Greek, okay? The word dwelt among us means tented or tabernacled among us. And the reason St. John used that very specific word is because he was trying to explain that the one who tabernacled or who tented among his people in the wilderness is the same one who took flesh of the virgin and dwelt among us, Christ the Savior, right? That's why the same word is used, but it doesn't get properly translated in English, okay? So the tabernacle was the tent, the dwelling place where the Israelites would meet God in the wilderness, okay? And of course, so it's very easy to see how the tent or the tabernacle is like St. Mary, because the Israelites would not meet God out in the open, right? Moses would go talk to God in the tabernacle, okay? And we would see that it would say that a cloud would come upon the tabernacle, right? So that was the meeting place for God and the Israelites, okay? So St. Mary is the tabernacle which held God in the Old Testament is a symbol of St. Mary who held God, the Word, okay? The golden pot where the manna was hidden. That's like straight from the Theotokea, right? The golden pot where the manna was hidden. Okay, that one's easy. First of all, what was the manna? Anyone remember what the manna was? Yeah, Kevin? The bread that rained down on them from heaven, which this was like a big point of pride and for the Jews, because they could say that while we were wandering in the desert for 40 years, our God would rain food on us. And what do your gods do, right? What do your idols do? Our God could literally rain bread. And that's why God told them, you shall take this bread, this holy manna, and put it in a pot, and put it in the ark, and it will be for you a remembrance of what I did for you when you were in the wilderness. God told them that this is a remembrance, something for you to remember what I did, okay? So obviously, the pot holds the bread, and the bread saved them because they didn't have any food. And St. Mary holds Christ, who is the bread of life, right? So that's a clear parallel. And the golden lampstand in the temple, again, carried the fire. And St. Mary carried the fire of divinity, right? She carried Christ, the fire of divinity, okay? The golden censer, okay? I think we all understand, most of us why is the censer, the golden censer, the shoria, a figure of St. Mary in the Old Testament? Who knows? Yes, Luke? It held something, what other than the incense is in the shoria? The coal, okay? The shoria holds the fire, the coal, okay? But it doesn't destroy the shoria, okay? And that's an important point for us, because St. Mary held, again, the fire of Christ's divinity, but it didn't consume her. And it's the same thing with the burning bush, is that the shoria holds the fire, which is Christ and his divinity, but it's not consumed by the fire. Okay, and that's another simple. All of these things are in the Old Testament. And of course, the rod of Aaron. The rod of Aaron is a different one. It's not a container, but the rod of Aaron was planted because God wanted, they wanted to decide who was going to be the priests, which family would be the priestly family. So they put the rods, and one of the rods grew flower from it. It budded, okay? Without planting or watering, right? And that's the same as St. Mary, is that Christ grew in her womb, but without planting or watering, right? We say without the seed of man. St. Mary conceived without the seed of man, and it's the same for the rod, okay? And then Jacob's ladder, right? Jacob saw a dream of a ladder going up to heaven and angels descending up and down the ladder. We have a beautiful icon in the big church of it. And in the same way, St. Mary connected, right? She connected. So Christ came from above down to earth through St. Mary. And because of that, now we are able to go back up to heaven because we lost the connection. But through St. Mary, we regain the connection to heaven. Okay? And the last thing is the burning bush, which is very similar to the Shoria, so we don't need to talk about that anymore. But yes, the fire of divinity did not destroy the Shoria, and it didn't destroy the bush. So just again, Saturday Theotokeia, part 15, if somehow that can stick in your memory and you're eating lunch tomorrow or something, and tomorrow's the feast, so we should consider doing something nice like that, maybe when we have a break. So quickly, we're not going to go over all these. We just want to get an idea that the church has a lot of feasts for St. Mary, okay? There's even a regular monthly feast, So on the 21st of every Coptic month, we always commemorate St. Mary no matter what, okay? Those are regardless of the feasts that are specific to her, okay? But one thing that we should recognize about this feast that's unique, tomorrow's feast, is that most of the saints, when we celebrate, for example, St. Mark, the feast of St. Mark in May, what are we celebrating? Are we celebrating his birthday? Huh? Yes, his martyrdom, his departure. Very good. And that is what the church always does. That's a lesson to us from the church, that when a church sets someone's feast, it sets it on his departure date. Never his birthday, never the date of the performance of his greatest miracle, the departure date. For us here, we are celebrating not the departure of St. Mary tomorrow. We are celebrating something unique that has only happened to 2 other people, and not even in the same way that it happened to St. Mary. But we celebrate the day. For example, can you go to Jerusalem right now and see the body of St. Mary? Because it's not here, right? Because it was assumed, okay? The Lord took St. Mary's body up to heaven after she departed. So there's a separate day for her departure, which is in January. That is the major feast for St. Mary in January. And then there's and then we have this, which is kind of confusing, but then we have the fast culminating with the Assumption of her body, okay? So that's just one thing that we should note, that we're not tomorrow celebrating her departure, but we're celebrating her body being taken up to heaven. And those 2 other characters that we mentioned, or that I referenced, are, does anyone know who they are? Who else was taken up to heaven in the body immediately? They didn't depart, but they were taken up to heaven immediately, yes. Elijah, very good. One more. Yes, David? Enoch. Very good, David. Yes. So, yes. So, Elijah and Enoch, okay? Those are the 2 who were taken up, but they're still alive, okay? They had not departed like St. Mary. After we depart, do we just go up, when the judgment day happens and it's the end of time, do we just go up to heaven? Like, do we just stay in the spirit alone will be in heaven? Is that what we say? No, we say that there will be a glorified body in heaven, right? That's the teaching of the church, that there will be a bodily resurrection in the last day, okay? So Christ, because of his great love for St. Mary, was unwilling to leave her body until the day of resurrection, of the general resurrection that all of us will go through, okay? So that's why she was assumed up early, because of the importance and the specialty of St. Mary in the eyes of God. Now we can move really quick, we're almost done, to the power of intercessions, right? And this is really St. Mary's main role in our life. It's nice to understand the things in the Old Testament that foreshadow St. Mary. I think that's important, but the main thing about St. Mary is her intercessory role, okay? And sometimes we get a lot of criticism not from Catholics, of course, because they believe in the intercession of the saints, but just from other Protestant denominations about how we hold up St. Mary and how we revere the saints, okay? But you should have great confidence. You should feel confident in the fact that reverencing the saints, or giving veneration, like how we just did, giving veneration to the saints is very scripturally scripturally based, okay? It's not something that got made up. In fact, the alternative position was something that got made up, okay? Not reverencing saints is something that got made up, okay? Because from the beginning, giving reverence and veneration to the saints always existed, even in the Old Testament, okay? So the one point here we should first focus on is that in the Gospel of St. Matthew, Christ says that I am the God of the living, not the God of the dead, okay? And also, when Christ was transfigured, yesterday was the Feast of Transfiguration, or that was today, Monday? Sorry, Monday. So the Feast of Transfiguration was on Monday. During that feast, who appeared? Christ transfigured in his full glory, and then what? Moses and Elijah, right? But Moses and Elijah had already departed. And that just shows you that the saints are still alive, right? We know that the saints are still existing, okay? And that they're receptive to us. So another example, so that point is just so that we recognize that the saints are alive. The example of St. Mary's intercessory role, the best example, is the wedding at Cana of Galilee. And we all know that story, right? It's the first miracle. It's when Christ changed the water into the wine at the wedding. There's just a quick point to make about that with regards to the power of intercessions, and it's that it's not like Christ was in the middle of his ministry. It's not like he had already started performing miracles, and then this event happened, so he's like, okay, one more miracle, no problem. No, Christ had not begun his ministry yet. He was not he was hidden, obscure. The people he lived around in his neighborhood did not know who he was. They thought he was just a regular man, a carpenter, right? But when he decided to perform this miracle, that is when the ministry started, and that's when his divinity was revealed, okay? So you should recognize that by her telling him, they have no wine, right? And then him saying, what does this have to do with me, right? That's a clear no. It's not my, and he told her, it's not my time. That's a clear no. But not only does he do it, but he performs a miracle which starts off the ministry and makes him known to the people, right? When he was living in obscurity and living hidden his whole life from people knowing about the divinity, okay? So you should see right there very clearly that he would do anything for St. Mary, and he would do something which was probably a great inconvenience to him. Probably he didn't have a plan to start then. He said the time is not yet, right? So that shows you that when St. Mary has a word, very powerful. Also, this is like, I really love these stories in the Old Testament. I would highly encourage anyone to just Google them and look them up. But when God was going to destroy, in the Old Testament, God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Do you remember who he had a debate with? Who said that? Yes, Mina. Abraham, okay? If you read this debate, it's the most amazing thing in the world. It starts off with 50. Right? So first, Abraham says, God, would you destroy the righteous with the wicked? What if you find 50 good people in this city? And God says, okay, you know what? Fine. If you find me 50, I won't destroy the city. And then Abraham says, okay, well, what about 45? And God says, very well. If you find me 45, I won't. All the way, it goes from 50 to 45 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10. 10. 6 steps. And each time God is saying, okay, find me those 10 and I won't destroy the city. What is a greater example of intercession than that, right? And actually there is one more greater one, which is when God debates with Moses. Okay, so the Israelites had made a gold calf, and God says, Moses, hurry down the mountain because those people are worshiping a golden calf now. And then God is so enraged, and listen to what he says to Moses. This is amazing. He tells him, let me wipe out those people, and I will give you a new nation. I will give you a better people. That's what God told Moses. Let me get rid of them for you. They are a headache. They don't listen, right? And Moses says, no, the Egyptians will look at us and say this, and they'll say that our God is wrathful and without mercy. So Moses calmed down God's wrath, right? Even when he would have received something better if he had just said, okay, yeah, God, they deserve it. Wipe them out, right? So that is a clear, very clear, powerful example of the intercessions of the saints. That when the people who are close to God's heart, when they request something from him, there is an inclination to give in to that request, right? And Moses and Abraham are nothing, I'm sorry, but they can't be compared to the mother of God, right? Can't be compared, okay? And then we can just look at these two very nice quotes about St. Mary and intercessions from St. Basil and St. John Chrysostom. St. John Chrysostom says, "It is impossible to be saved without the help of the most blessed Virgin, because those who are not saved by the justice of God are saved by the intercession of St. Mary." Okay? Next, St. Basil says, "O sinner, be not discouraged, but have recourse to St. Mary in all your necessities. Call her to your assistance, for she is the divine will, for such is the divine will that she should help in every kind of necessity." Okay? So those are what the fathers say, and then we can really quickly just conclude about talking about St. Mary of Egypt. I think we all know, generally speaking, about St. Mary of Egypt. She lived in the desert as an ascetic, as a hermit, for 47 years, and she lived a very unholy life in the beginning part of her life. She was a lot of fornication, until one time she went to Jerusalem, and she was trying to go inside the church, and she was prevented by a supernatural force from entering the church, right? Something stopped her body from entering the church. And when she cried and made supplications, there was an icon outside of the church. She was permitted to enter the church, okay? And eventually she went on to live a life by herself in the wilderness for decades on end. And we know Saint Zosima used to go give her communion. But I just want us to Saint Mary of Egypt loved Saint Mary, the Theotokos, right? So the one thing that we should just be conscious of is this wonderful quote from, sorry, when we're almost done. This one quote that I want to share from St. Mary of Egypt. I'm just going to read it really quick because it's very beautiful. And then we're done. This is the last one, okay? It says, this is St. Mary's of Egypt, her own prayer. These are her words. It says, "O Lady, Mother of God, who gave birth in the flesh to God the Word, how well I know that it is no honor or praise to you when one so impure and depraved as I look up to your icon. But I have heard that God, who was born of you, became man for the purpose to call sinners to repentance. Then help me, for I have no other help. Order the entrance of the church to be open to me. Be my faithful witness before your Son, that I will never again defile my body by the impurity of fornication, but as soon as I have seen the tree of the cross, I will renounce the world and its temptations and will go wherever you will lead me." Okay? So this is like a beautiful prayer of St. Mary of Egypt that we can use, right? That I've heard that God, who was born of you, came for the purpose of calling sinners to repentance. What a beautiful prayer, right? So with the feast approaching us tomorrow, we should take St. Mary of Egypt as an example, and we should just never forget that St. Mary has a huge role in our lives, and she longs for our salvation just as God does, right? And that she wants to give anything that we have that's positive. She wants to put it before her Son and say, "Look, your servant did this. It's a good thing. Help him," right? So St. Mary is always there looking out for our salvation, just as in the same way that God is. And glory be to God forever.